Hi everybody, I'm here today to do my April book haul. I bought a handful of books in April. I ordered them all online, most of them secondhand as per usual. And I had them all delivered to a collecting station, so completely contactless. I am in fact still waiting for 2 books to be delivered that I ordered at my most local bookshop just down the street. But it looks like they can't get them delivered at the moment, so I thought I'd just go ahead with a book haul anyway, and who knows, maybe in doing so I'll jinx it, and perhaps this afternoon I'll get a call that they have been delivered. And before I get to the books, there's one thing that I've been wondering. In the past, I haven't included the ebooks that I bought in my book hauls because I thought that maybe it wouldn't be all that interesting to talk about the book, a new book, if I can't show you the physical object. But on the other hand, I've been buying quite a lot of ebooks, as you can imagine, recently, and they are all normal books. They are not e-arcs, they are not self-published books. Some of them are quite buzzy books, in fact. So I've been wondering, would you like me to just include these books in my normal book hauls with an image of the cover inserted in the video? Then I'll do that in the future, and I might even make a What's on my Kindle video. But onto the books. The only books that I bought new are the first 2 books in the Stormkeeper's Quartet by Catherine Doyle, The Stormkeeper's Island and The Lost Tide Warriors. These are middle grade books, as you might guess from the cover. I have already read the first book and wrapped it up in my last wrap-up. This is the story of 11-year-old Finn, who gets sent by his mother to live for some time with his grandfather on the island where the family comes from, which is the fictitious Irish island of Arranmore. And when he gets there, Finn soon discovers that the island is full of magic and that his grandfather has a very special place in that magic, and that he, Finn himself, has a very special connection with the island, and that maybe the island even has a plan for him for the future. This is a very charming and magical book. However, it is almost too big for itself. The story soon escalates and comes to encompass the age-old battle of good versus evil, and a battle of 2 rival magicians, one good, one evil. And I thought that this whole element and this backstory was too grand for the tone of the book and the setting of the book. I would have liked to just read about a magical island. I still liked it enough to read on though, and I'm sure children would adore this. And then my very eclectic interests made me buy this, Preferred Lies. This is a history of golf. But it was written by Andrew Greig, and Andrew Greig is a poet, and he wrote one of my favorite non-fiction nature writing books, which is called At the Loch of the Green Corrie. And like that book, Preferred Lies seems to be a mixture of history and personal story, this time all about the sport of golf, as it originated and developed in Scotland. So I don't expect to find anything about Tiger Woods in here, but probably lots of St. Andrews. I've been to St. Andrews and I found a golf ball on the beach and took it home with me as a souvenir. But I would never have bought this book if it weren't written by this author. No idea what I've gotten myself into with this. And I've also been curious about the fiction that Andrew Greig writes for some time, so I finally bought one of his novels, The Return of John McNab. This is a retelling or an updated version of John McNab by John Buchan. I've never read any Buchan before, and I don't intend to, or rather I intend not to. But I'm sure this one stands on its own. The plot is essentially the same. 3 friends make a challenge to poach a salmon, a deer, and a grouse from 3 highland estates, and the fastest one wins. I expect this to be a good adventure story, but interspersed with some real quality poetic nature writing. And next, decades after it was cool, I bought Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard. This is a play with the 2 title characters as protagonists, who are minor characters in Shakespeare's Hamlet, who are only just onlookers onto the whole drama of Hamlet. But in this play, they take center stage, and apparently it is more than a little reminiscent of Waiting for Godot. I thought it was about time that I filled this gap in my education. Next, I have two poetry collections, neither of which are very recent releases by any interpretation of the word. But I was looking in a second-hand shop, and I'm lucky if I find any poetry collection that I want in a second-hand shop online. So I bought The Wasteland and Other Poems by T.S. Eliot, which I guess needs no introduction, and Meeting the British by Paul Muldoon. Paul Muldoon is an Irish poet, but he lives in the US now. This book was published in 1987, and I've already read about a third of the poems, and I have to say it is immediately obvious that Paul Muldoon is a member of that generation whose poetry is most inaccessible to me. We don't seem to share much of an idealistic as well as educational background, and the American influences seem to only exacerbate that situation. So this makes reading this collection a frustrating experience, but also an interesting one. And I'm continuing my World War I journey. This journey experienced a lull because I was reading Im Westen nichts Neues, All Quiet on the Western Front, when the COVID-19 situation escalated, and I just couldn't go on with it. It was too intense, too awful. I got until page 70 and I already cried 3 times and wanted to throw up at least once. So that was out of the question. But I'm going to continue with this one as soon as I can, and I bought The Return of the Soldier by Rebecca West. As the title might suggest, this is about a soldier, a British soldier who returns home from the trenches in France and is deeply traumatized to the extent where he doesn't recognize his young wife whom he married just before he left for the war. But more than his story, it is the story of the 3 most important women in his life, or the 3 women for whom he was a very important person. This wife that I've just mentioned, his cousin, and his childhood sweetheart, and it is the story of how they deal with this situation for which they have no roadmap and with which they are left completely alone. And a few weeks ago, I read Susan Hill's World War I story, Strange Meeting, and I thought, oh, I should really read more Susan Hill. Susan Hill is best known for her folk horror stories, first and foremost, The Woman in Black. But I bought The Various Haunts of Men, which is the first installment in a detective series by her, which is set in a British small town. Does it need any more recommendation than that? And then I'm renewing my attempts to get into Jeanette Winterson, this time with The Passion. I tried to read my first Jeanette Winterson at the beginning of the year, which was Sexing the Cherry. And it doesn't seem to work for me. I might even put it down permanently. Sexing the Cherry is a series of quite lovely and poetic vignettes that are held together by the story of 2 protagonists, 2 first-person narrators who the narration switches between them. And one of them, at least, is just made deliberately gross, she herself and everything about her and around her, and it makes my skin crawl, and I don't want to read anything about her. But I also have another book by Jeanette Winterson, The Stone Gods, which sounds lovely, but somehow I'm reluctant to pick it up. So I'm trying again with The Passion, which is about a young follower of Napoleon who becomes disenchanted with his great leader and ends up starting a new life in Venice. And if the blurb is to be believed, it is a fairy tale about passion, gambling, madness, and androgynous ecstasy. Sounds good. My next book is the only one in this batch which I found for free in a little free library. It's Red Dust by Gillian Snowball. This was apparently turned into a movie, but I've never heard of that movie. This is set in South Africa, and it is about 3 people whose past is catching up with them. But it's not just their own personal history, but their own history is tied together with the history of the country. And it is apparently about reckoning with the past, with the apartheid regime and the hate crimes that were committed during that regime. All in the package of a thriller, I guess. That sounds like it could be very good, and it is a Virago publication. That's what caught my eye in the first place, the Virago apple, when I saw it on the shelf, and it's the reason that I took it home with me. And finally, I'm completing my Sarah Waters collection with Affinity. This is set in the Victorian era and is about a woman who develops a relationship with a woman who is a spiritualist and a medium and sits in prison for fraud. I am very curious to see if Sarah Waters can make this old stock character of paranormal romances, the medium, seem fresh and interesting and sympathetic. I am now somewhat overwhelmed with choice when it comes to Sarah Waters, and I don't know where to start. I would be very grateful if you could leave me a comment saying which of hers is your favorite, or if you've read one of her books and liked it enough to recommend it. And I might even listen to you, and that would make my choice easier. So these are all the books that I have today. I hope that your own bookshelves are well stocked as well and that you don't get bored with your books. Bye, take care.